The room wasn't designed to remember who entered it. The walls were beige. The windows were drawn. And the air was stale from the constant cycle of meetings and coffee. But on certain days, history breathed heavier than usual. Two presidents, years apart, had walked into that exact room, each carrying the weight of a nation. The first came with calm. The second with chaos. Barack Obama entered that room in early 2009, when the world economy was unraveling like a loose thread from a flag. The headlines screamed panic. Banks were collapsing. Homes were being lost by the minute. But inside that unassuming space in the West Wing, Obama didn't raise his voice. He listened. He questioned. And when silence followed, he led. Years later, Donald Trump walked into the same room, but not with the same silence. It was 2020. A virus was spreading, fast and invisible. Lives were being lost at a rate the nation hadn't seen in generations. But instead of calm, the room was filled with denial. Instead of reflection, it echoed with blame. The same four walls. The same presidential seal on the carpet. But two entirely different tests of leadership. This is the story of the room they both entered. But more than that, it's about what each man left behind. Not every room in the White House listens. But that day, it did. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that seemed louder than usual. Barack Obama stood still for a moment inside the Situation Room, not for dramatic effect, but because he always paused. Observed. Read the temperature of the room before he altered its climate. Around the table sat the top economic minds of the country, Summers, Geithner, Bernanke. Charts and numbers blurred together into one overwhelming truth: the American economy was bleeding, and the bandages weren't holding. Yet when Obama took his seat, he didn't reach for the documents. He looked at them, each of them, and asked the question no one had dared to voice. What happens if we save the banks, but not the people? Silence. In a city obsessed with answers, that question stopped everything. Because they knew what the rescue packages meant: stabilization, investor confidence, Dow Jones calmness. But for the millions of Americans who had just lost their homes, their jobs, their futures? Nothing. They wouldn't be in the room. They weren't even on the margins of the spreadsheets. Rehook: leadership isn't measured by what you inherit, but by what you choose to carry. Obama didn't yell. He never needed to. But his stillness spoke louder than any fist on the table. Wall Street, he finally said, will get its memo. But Main Street? They need a map. The metaphor landed. Like a brick. What followed was not a rewriting of policy, but a redefinition of priority. That night, he had handwritten notes returned to the Treasury team. Scribbled edits in the margins of a polished bailout plan. New clauses. New allocations. Direct mortgage relief. Small business buffers. Community bank support. It was no longer just a rescue, it was a reach. And it changed the temperature of that room forever. The press would never see the first draft. Only the final. But inside the West Wing, everyone who sat at that table would remember the day the numbers weren't enough. The day the president didn't settle for the politically safe thing, but demanded the morally right thing. Some call it symbolism. Others, strategy. But history knows it simply as, the day the room listened. A room built for 1,000, sat empty when the truth arrived. It was called the Liberty Hall. A newly constructed conference center in the heart of Washington, built under the last administration, filled with gold-lined drapes and crystal chandeliers, designed for applause, not accountability. It had been prepared to host the new administration's national emergency address, the one meant to defend their handling of the recent hurricane disaster in the South. The press was invited. The party elites were seated. But there was one unexpected absence: the American people. The storm had wiped out electricity in 3 states. Thousands displaced. FEMA hadn't responded for 72 hours. And yet, the statement to be read on the podium wasn't about aid or recovery, it was about optics, poll numbers, and unfortunate timing. When Obama stepped into the hall that afternoon, uninvited, unanticipated, and unarmed with anything but a single folder in his hand, the silence was almost sacred. The Republican front bench glanced over, half amused. "What is he doing here?" someone muttered. A camera turned toward him. Then another. He didn't walk to the stage. He walked past it. Right to the row where the displaced families were meant to sit, now empty. He sat down in one of the chairs. Looked toward the media. And said, "You built this room for a show. I came to ask, where's the relief truck?" The moment was electric. Twitter froze. Cable networks shifted. Every camera turned from the podium to the man who wasn't on the schedule. The hall couldn't be filled because the truth had no assigned seat. But it walked in anyway. What most didn't know, what the cameras missed, was that Obama had spent the last 48 hours in shelters across Louisiana. Not with press. Not with security detail. Just him and a single aide. He listened to a woman whose daughter had to be medevaced because no clean water was available. He sat with a father who held his roofless baby for 6 hours under a tarp. And he wrote, by hand, what he called the real address. That was the folder in his hand. Minutes after his spontaneous presence took over the broadcast, the new administration spokesperson stepped forward, demanding the stage. Obama didn't stop him. He just handed him the folder. "Before you read the party's speech," he said calmly, "maybe read this first." The room fell to a hush. The man opened the folder. Read. Paused. Folded it shut. And said, "We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. They never did. Outside the hall, on the steps beneath the Grand Eagle statue, a crowd had gathered. They weren't press. They weren't donors. They were survivors. And one of them held a sign. "He sat where we were missing." As Obama exited, a young boy stepped out from the crowd, muddy shoes and all, and asked him, "Are you the president again?" Obama smiled. "No. I'm just the man who remembered your seat." But inside that smile, was the shadow of a room still waiting to be filled. They said the people had moved on. So why was every eye still looking back? The morning after Liberty Hall, something strange happened. In dozens of cities, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, people began leaving empty chairs outside government buildings. Some placed folded notes on them. Some left bottled water, a blanket, a name. They called them absence markers. And no one claimed credit. No hashtag. No influencers. Just silence made visible. The press scrambled. Was it coordinated? Was it political? No one knew. All they knew was this: the rooms that were meant to hold answers were being filled with reminders. Inside the White House, advisors debated the optics. "Ignore it," one said. "It'll pass." Another suggested a photo op with a family. "Pick someone from the shelters," he added. "We'll spin it into resilience." Obama, however, had already left town. He was in Iowa, visiting a small community center that had recently been converted into a refugee reception space for climate evacuees. There were no lights, no cameras. Just 2 tables, 12 chairs, and a child drawing on the floor. Obama sat on the floor beside him. "What are you drawing?" he asked. The boy, maybe 8, maybe 9, looked up. "A house that doesn't move when it rains." Obama paused. Then quietly took out a pen and began drawing next to the boy. A roof. A wall. A nameplate that read, "Still standing." What happened next wasn't planned. Not by him. Not by anyone. A volunteer snapped a photo. Not posed, not prepared. Just the former president, sitting on the floor with a boy who wanted a home. The image spread, not because of the man, but because of what wasn't in the frame: power, pretense, podiums. By noon the next day, the absence markers became presence pledges. Crowds began gathering outside FEMA offices, holding signs with names of people still missing, neighborhoods still without power, streets still flooded. It wasn't outrage. It wasn't protest. It was something rarer: memory. The current president held a press conference. "We recognize the concerns," he said. "We have deployed new resources." But in the Q&A, a reporter asked, "Did you see the photo of Obama yesterday?" He paused. "I did. Do you think a picture of a man on the floor did more than your entire press briefing?" Silence. Obama, meanwhile, hadn't said a word. That night, a televised town hall was scheduled in Atlanta. Experts, mayors, and survivors were set to speak. Halfway through, a surprise guest appeared. Not on stage. In the audience. Barack Obama. No announcement. No microphone. But as the floor opened for questions, a young woman stood up and said, "My name is Angela. I lost my brother during the storm. He waited 3 days for help. I have no question. I just wanted to ask, were you with him?" The room froze. Obama stood. Slowly. Carefully. And replied, "I wasn't. But I'm here now. And if this country has any heart left, it'll be with you too." There were no cheers. No clapping. Just breathing. Because something had shifted. It wasn't about left or right. It wasn't about polls or parties. It was about a country realizing that leadership isn't a broadcast. It's a presence. And sometimes, it's a silence that refuses to let grief be forgotten. The next morning, a chair appeared outside the Capitol. On it, a sign, "Reserved for the one who shows up." And inside the West Wing, someone asked the president, "Should we move it?" Another replied, "No. Leave it. Let them see it." And just like that, in a city built on power, a single empty chair became the loudest voice in the room.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that move the world. Thanks for watching.